We are going to head over now to our international news review with Steve Okun. I think, there we go. I see him coming up now.
Good morning, Steve.
How you doing?
Good morning, Neil. Good morning, Boomer.
Oh, ouch. We're going to start that way, are we? Okay. All right. Okay. Just remember, payback is a dish best served cold.
You didn't know. You didn't know to them, man. You didn't know the Netflix logo. So that's it.
A special welcome this morning to Tami Overby as well, Senior Director at McClarty Associates. Hi, Tami. How are you?
I'm well, and I take offense at that Boomer comment.
I know, right? We're totally there, right? With
He's taking a risk because many of our lovely loyal listeners are of a certain vintage, maturity. You put it out there, Steve.
Neil, us Gen Xers have to stay together.
Please
don't bring me to it. Don't bring me to it.
Please direct your comments to Steve Okun's Facebook page. He loves comments.
He does
on his Facebook page. So, all right, hey, let's get started. We got lots to talk about. The UNGA UN General Assembly is in full swing. This week has been a very busy week, talking about COVID, climate change, geopolitics, so many things happening. Steve, start us off with talking about the climate change, especially and where that went this week.
Well, Secretary Gutierrez kind of kicked off the General Assembly, warning humanity that we are on track for a hellscape and that we're facing catastrophe. So that kind of set the tone, for the week. The world has probably never faced more challenges. I mean, you got kind of the 3 C's all coming together. Obviously, we're still dealing with COVID. If we're not in a Cold War, and I don't think we are, we're certainly in an era of confrontation and heavy competition between the great powers. And you've got the existential threat of climate change. The UN is supposed to deal with all of those things. A cynic can say that the UN is incapable of dealing with those the way it's structured, but a lot happens behind the scenes, and that maybe there is some optimism when it comes to climate, COVID, and competition.
Tami, bringing yourself in there, I mean, I was watching it this week. You've got the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, saying it's a turning point for humanity. This is when he wasn't making bizarre Kermit the Frog references. Where do you stand on this, Tami? Are you upbeat? Are you downbeat? Where are you on this?
Well, I'm upbeat because the alternative is just too dark. But I do think that, the recognition of where the world is and the fact that we can't avoid this anymore. Every day there's a new headline, fires, floods. The world has to come together because we don't have a choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tami. Oh, are you there?
Yeah, she's there. She's finished.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say something else. Okay. When we look at all of these countries talking about different things, the U.S. has obviously, tried to position itself in the center of all this, and China has made some work. But the U.S. has had its work cut out for itself in dealing with France and the European Union following the submarine issue. I'll just put it that way. Steve, does Biden have the punch, the power, this sitting of the UN General Assembly that he might otherwise have had without these distracting issues?
Well, I don't know if you'd call them distracting issues. And what, is always frustrating, I found when, President Trump came in and he said, well, we're going to make America first. Showing that other presidents before him didn't put America first. Well, every president puts America first. And I think that what you saw here was, President Biden, when we, talk about, the submarine agreement between the U.S., the U.K. and Australia, is that this is where the U.S. is going to lead first, and that it could have been done much more effectively, but this was still the way you needed to go because the U.S. wanted to see competition come in first with China, and then you worry about multilateralism later. It kind of made the UN a little bit more difficult for the United States, though, leading into this with the timing, on top of the unilateral withdrawal with Afghanistan. So the U.S. has a long ways to go in terms of working multilaterally.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating, Tami, isn't it? The breakdown, if that's not too strong a word, between French and U.S. relations, if it's temporarily. I mean, Blinken, you mentioned there. I didn't know this until I read this week that Blinken actually grew up partly in Paris and is fluent in French and is very upset about the current situation. As you know, the ambassadors were withdrawn. And that didn't happen, I believe, Stephen Glenn will correct me, that didn't even happen during the so-called fallout over the Iraq War. 2004, the whole freedom fries when the U.S. and the French relations were quite tense. Even then, the ambassadors were not withdrawn as they have been here. So there is a real fallout between French and U.S. counterparts here, Tami, that will take a bit of time to mend.
Actually, I think the mending has already begun. I do think that Secretary Blinken's his history with France and his deep there have helped broker some movement. So while as Steve said, it could have been handled much smoother. It was a bit ham-fisted, but I think we have too many major issues that we need to be working together on. So and I think one of the other issues that they were suggesting might have been slowed down was the U.S. EU Tech Council meeting next week. Late this afternoon, the EU announced it is moving forward. So, while it was unfortunate, but I don't think it's just a roadblock.
Right. Steve, I thought it was interesting, just kind of a side note to the U.S., France, UK, and Australia issue, was that France is now preparing a bill that they're going to send to the Australians. Like, hey, you broke the contract, it's going to cost you. All right, bad feelings, hurt feelings aside, show us the money. From what you know about that, what did you see or what did you think when you read that?
I mean, no surprise whatsoever. I mean, if there's a contract, and you kind of learn in law school, right? Contracts are made to be broken. And so what you want to make sure is if one side breaks the contract, that the other side gets compensated fairly. If you trusted the other side completely, you wouldn't need a contract. And so, that this is a standard practice between governments, between individuals, between businesses. Now, the Australians have said the French were overrunning costs and that they weren't complying with what was intended with the agreement. And so there's certainly going to be a negotiation over this. But at the end of the day, Australia saw that it was in its national interest to break the contract with France and then move towards the U.S. and UK, become one of the few countries in the world that has nuclear propulsion submarines, because they need that now, given what China has been doing in this part of the world.
Tami, as someone who advises clients on Asia and trade matters, and you've spent a lot of time in Korea in particular, I'm very interested to know what you think this impact will have, if any, on this part of the world.
I think it absolutely will have an impact. I also think that the U.S. you're going to see the U.S. government bending over backwards to try to mollify France in another venue. But I think it was so important for security in Asia. It's no surprise that we had the first in-person Quad meeting today with President Biden, Australia, India, and Japan. Suga only has a couple of days left as leader of his party, and yet he spent a day in Washington. So, absolutely, it's a major impact.
Let's move forward. China is saying now that they are going to ban all cryptocurrencies, which is obviously sending some shockwaves through that community, and also maybe raising questions about what other governments might do if they would see this as a trend and be able to follow suit. Steve, take us through that, because she is also at the UN General Assembly, and he's got a lot of things on his plate right now as well.
Well, if anybody is shocked that China is clamping down on cryptocurrency, they're not following what China has historically done in certain sectors. And then you combine what cryptocurrency can be used for. Obviously, it's an alternative to sovereign currencies, and so governments don't like that. And the Chinese can act a lot faster and tougher than the U.S. can. But let's see what the U.S. does on crypto. But you've got the environmental aspect, and President Xi, at his pre-recorded speech, he wasn't there in person like President Biden, but his pre-recorded speech, he said China is going to stop building, coal-powered, electricity generation abroad. Now, we don't know what stopping building means? Does it mean that the Chinese governments will stop constructing? Or more importantly, does it mean the Chinese will stop financing? That would be much more important. Unclear what that means, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And the mining of cryptocurrencies, which take a lot of power generation to do, take place predominantly in China. And because that's where a lot of the cheap electricity is, because that's where the coal is that generates the electricity. So China is paying a huge environmental price when it comes to cryptocurrency, getting no benefits. And the government is obviously worried about control when it comes to financial transactions. So anyone who's surprised that for environmental reasons and for financial control reasons that China would ban cryptocurrency, I don't think has been paying a lot of attention.
Well, on that point, Tami, I mean, Steve clearly states, we've talked about it on his show many times, this is a clear shift in Chinese policy now. They're trying to reassert control. There's a shift away from fraud, money laundering. And of course, the key point here is that excessive energy usage that cryptocurrency involves, which is phenomenal. Do you see that? This is an ongoing process in China, but do you see this rolling out across other countries in this region?
I think everybody's watching China very closely, and the same environmental concerns everyone has. So it wouldn't be that much of a surprise. Everybody wants to have control of their financial markets. So let's see. But it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, look, I see this as a very convenient excuse by any government that wants to keep control of their fiat currency, whatever it is. Look, we all understand that the power taken in cryptocurrency is a lot, but China is 60% or just shy of powered by coal. Let's get real about where the real issue is for the environment. It is, they are the biggest polluter on the planet when it comes to fossil fuels, along with the U.S. So, to me, this whole, we're going to save the environment argument to get rid of cryptocurrency, I don't think so. I think it's much more about they want to have control over the financial sector of fiat currencies. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, let me be clear. I was not saying I agree with what they said the reason was, but I think it's spot on. I mean, just look at a whole host of areas where China is clamping down, whether it's the Uyghurs or Hong Kong or being more aggressive in Taiwan. And it was no accident that they announced last week that they want to join the CPTPP. So, I'm often suspicious of what their announcements are. But
I would say that, but both things can be true, right? I mean, you do need to do something about the environment. Sure. China is making pledges on getting to carbon neutrality and getting peak carbon emissions, and there is no way they can get there if there's going to be continued mining of cryptocurrency in that country. It's impossible. And it's, like Singapore, I think, still has its moratorium on new data centers here because so much of the electricity generated and used in Singapore is for data centers, and you can't do it anymore. So it's a real issue for the industry, and not just crypto and blockchain, but data centers as well. So it's a lot is going to be happening. So Glenn, yes, you could be a cynic on it, and there could be other reasons they're doing it, but doesn't mean they shouldn't be doing it for environmental reasons.
I totally agree with you, Steve. But I thought that this whole we want to save the world. I'm sorry, I'm not. I think we need to look further than that.
No, it's power. I mean, the fact that they're even clamping down on tuition centres and the education industry, which affects me personally, but I'm not bitter about it at all.
Not at all. Never hardly mention it.
No, it's a power battle.
All right, let's move on to our last topic here, and that is Vietnam at the United Nations General Assembly. Tami, let's start off with you. What role and what messages are they giving this year at the United Nations?
So President Phuc was there. There were a handful of leaders that were taking meetings with the business community. He was one of them, and he had quite a few small meetings. They said they were small because of COVID, but his message was clearly Vietnam is open for business. If we need more investment. Obviously, they have a huge COVID challenge that he's trying to overcome. But I saw him meet with at least a dozen companies. So the message was Vietnam's open for business.
Open for business, and yet their own citizens can't even leave their homes at the moment.
Well, yeah.
So isn't that a hard sell at this moment? Obviously, he's taking a longer term view, but Steve, how does he get around that? I mean, it is brutal there. I've got friends that I was talking to last week who are in Ho Chi Minh City. They literally cannot go out but once a week just to get groceries, and the police are on the corners checking to make sure.
Look, you got to look long term. And relatively speaking, as much as there's a frustration with expats and locals, of course, here in Singapore with all the restrictions, this is still a place that's very attractive for business. And part of it is relative, right? Compare Singapore today to Hong Kong. Compare Singapore with all the growth that's going to come in Southeast Asia. Companies still want to be here. Companies are still moving here. Vietnam's the same. Vietnam is an extraordinarily attractive market because of the demographics there, because of where it stands within China, because of the supply chain. So, yeah, you may short-term be frustrated with Vietnam, but, as Tami will attest, this is a market you really want to be in.
Steve, the other part about Vietnam is when they joined the Trans-Pacific Partnership, now CPTPP, they agreed to high standards, to comprehensive rules, to rule of law, to protecting intellectual property rights. So it is the place to look at in Asia these days.
I don't disagree, Tami, but knowing that you were coming on, I had a look at some figures here, and I don't know if these are the absolute latest figures, but I read that the fully vaccinated people in Vietnam stands at only 6.3%. It may have gone up slightly since then. 16%, 27% of Vietnam's population have received at least one jab. So we mentioned the long term, but short term, there are still some issues there, Tami, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. And the foreign business community in Vietnam, the AmChams, the EU Chams, even the Japanese Business Association have urged the Vietnamese government to explain that they have a plan, and the president privately laid it out for the business leaders that I was in the meeting with. But he needs to do that publicly, and he needs to make it clear to everyone that we do have a plan, and here's what it is.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, both for that. Lots going on in our ever-evolving world, as we all know. But it was interesting to see so many leaders at the UN this week.
It was. And just to wrap it up, speaking of leaders, Steve, your wife is watching this from quarantine. So do you have any messages?
Since you can't see your wife in person.
We are bringing couples together on Money FM.
That's what we do. It's all about the love.
It's the house is still standing, I think, is the main message to deliver.
Well, he's only doing it from this room because the other rooms are currently on fire.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks to you both. We appreciate your time today. Tami Overby and Steve Okun, both of McClarty Associates. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.